It was a cold evening at the old train station, the kind of evening when the air carried a quiet bite, and people hurried past with scarves pulled high over their faces. Among the crowd stood Anna. She wasn't rushing like the others. She simply stood there, holding her small handbag close, as though it contained everything she had left in the world. Her life had been a string of struggles lately. The bills piled up faster than she could count. Work had been hard to find, and every day seemed to weigh a little heavier on her shoulders. But even in the middle of her tiredness, there was something soft in her, a patience, a small, gentle hope that things might turn around. She had exactly $10 left in her purse that night, $10 that needed to stretch until she could find her next shift, or the next kind stranger who would lend her a little kindness. She didn't know, as she stood there, that her life was about to shift in a way she could never have imagined. Anna sat down on a worn wooden bench, the sound of footsteps and distant announcements filling the air around her. She lowered her handbag onto her lap and pressed her hands together for warmth. $10. That was all she had. She thought of bread, milk, maybe a little rice to last her through the week. It wasn't much, but she had learned to live on very little. She sighed, watching as people rushed by with their bags and coats, their faces full of purpose. She felt invisible, like just another shadow in the station. Her stomach ached slightly. She hadn't eaten since morning, but more than hunger, it was the weight of uncertainty that hurt the most. Still, she tried to smile. She always did. Life had taken much from her, but she refused to let it steal her kindness, and it was then, as she lifted her head, that she noticed him, a man standing a few steps away, dressed simply, almost blending into the crowd. His expression was uncertain, almost troubled, as though he too carried a burden. What Anna didn't know was that this meeting, with this quiet stranger, would change everything. The man shifted uneasily, glancing around as though searching for courage. Finally, he stepped closer to where Anna sat. "Excuse me," his voice was low, almost embarrassed. I'm sorry to bother you. I just realized I've misplaced my wallet. My train leaves in a few minutes, and I need $10 for the ticket." Anna blinked, startled. Of all the people in the station, he had come to hurt a woman who barely had enough for herself. Her fingers brushed the worn edge of her purse. $10, that was all. The last thread holding her together until tomorrow. She looked up at him. His eyes weren't sharp or demanding. They were soft, almost desperate, yet humble. He didn't look like someone playing a trick. Something inside her stirred. A quiet voice whispered that kindness should not depend on what we have left, but on what we are willing to give. So, slowly, she opened her bag, pulled out the crumpled $10 bill, and pressed it into his hand. "It's all I have," she said softly, "but maybe it can help you tonight." The man's eyes widened, not just in relief but in something deeper. The man stared at the bill resting in his palm, as if it were more than just paper. His throat tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. "Thank you," he finally whispered, his voice trembling. "You don't know what this means." Anna gave a small smile, a nod that carried both kindness and humility. She didn't ask who he was, or why fate had pushed him toward her. She simply gathered her bag and stood. "It's just a little," she said softly, "but maybe it will get you where you need to go." Then she turned, blending into the moving crowd. Her steps were slow, not because she doubted her choice, but because she carried the weight of knowing she had given away her last dollar. Still, her heart felt strangely lighter. There was peace in helping, even when it cost her something. The man remained where he was, watching her until she disappeared beyond the station doors. He clenched the bill tightly in his hand, not as a ticket but as a reminder, for in that moment he knew this simple act of kindness would not be forgotten. Not tonight, not ever. Anna pushed open the door to her apartment and stepped inside. The room was quiet, too quiet, as if the world outside had forgotten her. She set her handbag on the table and sat down, folding her hands in her lap. The silence pressed against her, reminding her of the truth. She had nothing left now, not even $1 for bread or milk. Her stomach grumbled, but she ignored it. She had grown used to hunger. It was the uncertainty she never got used to. The thought of tomorrow, of how she would manage, weighed heavily on her mind. And yet, as she leaned back in her chair, she felt no regret. She could still see his eyes, the stranger at the station, the way they had softened when she handed him the bill. It had been the right choice. She told herself that over and over. Sometimes, doing the right thing meant walking a harder path. she sighed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'll find a way," she whispered into the stillness. Somehow, she always did. Little did she know, the stranger she had helped was already thinking of a way to find her again. Far across the city, in a quiet apartment high above the glowing streets, the man sat in silence. The room was modern and polished, the kind of place that spoke of wealth and success. Yet he sat hunched over the table, staring at the crumpled $10 bill in his hand, as though it were the most precious thing he owned. His name was Michael Toomost. He was a man of means, an investor, a quiet millionaire who had built a life of comfort. But in that station, wrapped in a plain coat, he had been just another traveler. No one had known who he was, and yet, when he had asked for help, it was not the wealthy who stopped, not the confident faces rushing past. It was Anna, tired, worn, and struggling, who had given him her last dollar without hesitation. He leaned back, closing his eyes. That kind of kindness was rare, priceless. Michael knew, in that moment, that he could not let her act fade into memory. He had to find her again, not to repay her $10, but to change her life. The next morning, Michael stood once more in the train station. The same station where a stranger's kindness had touched his heart the night before. He held the $10 bill in his hand, folding and unfolding it nervously. Around him, the station buzzed with movement, voices echoing, trains arriving and leaving, footsteps scattering across the tiled floor. But he wasn't here for a train. He was here for her. His eyes swept across the benches, the ticket counters, the shadowed corners. He imagined her sitting quietly, clutching her small handbag, her gentle smile hiding the weight she carried. He asked himself what drove her to give when she had so little. What gave her such quiet courage? Hours passed, but she did not appear. Michael's chest tightened with worry. Perhaps she wouldn't return. Perhaps she had simply vanished back into the city's endless crowd. But he wasn't ready to give up. Not now. He slipped the bill back into his pocket, turned toward the exit, and whispered to himself, "I'll find her," because something told him this was only the beginning. It was late afternoon when Anna returned to the station. She walked slowly, her steps weary, her coat pulled tight against the cold. She settled onto the same bench as the night before, her handbag resting like a shield in her lap. Her face was pale, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. She had managed to get through the day, but it had taken everything out of her. From across the station, Michael saw her. For a moment he froze, the crowd moving like a blur between them. Relief washed over him, warm and certain. There she was, the woman whose kindness had touched him deeper than he could explain. He took a careful step forward, then another, his gaze never leaving her. He noticed the small details now, the way her hands folded tightly together, the faint sadness in her eyes, the quiet dignity in her posture. Anna, lost in thought, did not see him yet. She only stared at the ground, unaware that the man she had helped was walking back into her life. And this time, he had not come to ask for help. He had come to give it. Anna felt a shadow fall across her bench. She looked up, startled, and there he was, the stranger from last night. For a moment, she was too surprised to speak. She had thought she would never see him again. Michael smiled gently and held out the same $10 bill, still folded, still worn. "You gave me this when I needed help," he said quietly, "and I haven't forgotten." Anna blinked, confusion flickering in her tired eyes. I didn't expect to see you again," she whispered. "I didn't expect to meet someone like you," Michael replied. His voice carried a weight of truth, a depth that made her chest tighten. She looked at the bill in his hand, and then back at him. "I didn't give it expecting anything back," she said softly. "I just thought you needed it more than I did." Michael lowered himself to sit beside her, his gaze steady. "That's exactly why I came back. Because you gave when you had nothing, and I can't walk away from that." Anna's breath caught. Something told her this man was not who she thought he was. Not at all. Michael placed the $10 bill back into Anna's hand, but this time, it wasn't alone. Beside it lay a simple business card, embossed with his name. "My name is Michael Grant," he said softly. "I own several companies here in the city. Last night, I wasn't asking for money. I was asking for something far greater, and you gave it without hesitation." Ina's breath caught as her eyes traced the letters on the card. A millionaire, a man of influence. Yet he had stood before her in the cold, as if he were no one at all. Her lips trembled. "I don't understand." Michael leaned closer, his gaze steady. I came back because I want to help you. Not just to return your kindness, but to honor it. People like you deserve doors to open. If you'll let me, I'd like to give you that chance. Asterisk tears welled in Anna's eyes, blurring the card in her hands. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders began to lift. Asterisk, and in that crowded station, surrounded by strangers, she felt her life shift toward something brighter. Asterisk, a new beginning had just begun.